Now it's our privilege to introduce our presenter for the evening, Dr. Matthew Stafford. Please join us in welcoming him.
Thank you. Thanks for coming back. I really appreciate it. It's very kind of you. We're talking family business. You know, somebody said to me before we got started, they said, you know, I've read all this, I've studied all this before, but it's kind of nice, and it's like looking at an old photograph, you know, back of where we've been. So I hope you're enjoying this. I'm certainly enjoying it, and I'm enjoying you. So thank you for your time and attention. I want to thank the sponsors, again, because people have put up their time and money and bought us food, and I really appreciate the fact that they've done this for us, showing their community outreach. The agenda, tonight's the Framers' Constitution. I'm going to tell you, it's not easy. It's not a difficult document. Take you about 30 minutes to read it all the way through, but some of the language is pretty archaic and complicated. So hopefully we'll spend some time to make it clear. Talk a little bit about ratification. There's a wonderful book on ratification over there if you're interested in it. Patricia Meyer's book, it's over there, but it was a great time. America was tearing itself apart. We do that a lot. But we were tearing ourselves apart trying to figure out if we were going to go with this Constitution or if we were going to go with something completely different. The Bill of Rights is kind of the calm the sea. That's the oil we pour on the troubled seas to get it through. Talk about that. And next week we'll talk about the evolving Constitution, which is a lot of fun. It's kind of like a bullet train ride through 260 years of history. You'll see World War I and World War II go by just about as fast as a billboard. But nevertheless, there's fascinating stories in there that I guarantee you'll say, wow, that's really something. And before you have time to get upset about it, will be the next story. So I always have fun doing that. But this is a deeper dive. Our submarine is down deep. It's had to turn on the lights to try to illuminate this topic this week. So where we left off last week is this question. Are we going to fix the Articles or are we going to start over? Recall the weaknesses of the Articles of Confederation. This is tearing America apart. We have people, particularly the coastal cities, are making their own negotiations with foreign powers. They're establishing tariffs to try to protect their industries, and as soon as they do, their next door neighbor cuts their prices, closes their tariffs, and all the business flows that way. We have at times militias on the border threatening war with one another. It's not going well. Then we have the Mount Vernon Convention of 1785. General George Washington, he leaves the military and goes back, and he's going to be a private farmer, right? It doesn't last very long. In 1785, Virginia and Maryland decide to set up this company on how they're going to manage.
Can we get that mic turned up? Your microphone turned up?
You need more microphone.
Yes, please.
It's up all the way, so we'll see what else we can do. It's up all the way.
Right.
I'll just have to talk louder, I guess. Point to your ear if you can't hear me, and I'll talk louder. Anyway, in 1785, Virginia and Maryland decide that they've got to make the Potomac navigable so they can get to the Shenandoah Valley and on eventually into the Ohio region. And they asked none other than George Washington to be president of their company. And George Washington steps in and says there's too many rules, too many states competing with each other. He invites Virginia and Maryland to his home at Mount Vernon, and they decide how this whole thing's going to work. And they all sat and they said, isn't this great? Some people getting together, talking over some tea and wine, and we can solve problems. Wouldn't it be great if the federal government could do this, but the federal government doesn't have the power to do this because they can't regulate commerce. So what they decide to do is they're going to have a convention. They're going to pull all the states together and they're going to figure out a way to make the Articles of Confederation work for commerce. And that's going to be the Annapolis Convention. 11th through the 14th of September, and 5 states come to the Annapolis Convention, and they get together and they're having a great time, and they talk to one another and they say, the heck with this, this isn't working either. We don't have enough people coming, we haven't figured this thing out. What we really need is a grand conference, and that's going to be this next conference they have, which we now call the Constitutional Convention, which they called the Grand Convention or the Philadelphia Convention. It was held in what we know as Independence Hall, but at that time it wasn't called Independence Hall. Nevertheless, that's going to be the Constitutional Convention. They get together and they want to fix the Articles of Confederation. Within a short period of time, they realize they can't possibly fix it. It's too fundamentally flawed. There's too much wrong with it. And so they decide that with 12 of the 13 states represented, and from what we've talked about already, I bet you know who wasn't there. Rhode Island. because Rhode Island will cast its middle finger into the air to the United States of America until George Washington is elected, and finally they'll say, okay, okay, because you can't be little Rhode Island by yourself if the rest of the nation goes that way. But nevertheless, 12 of the 13 states, and they start to negotiate. They adopted these lengthy rules to govern them, and the rules are kind of interesting. If you read those rules, you saw them before last week. These are right out of the Articles of Confederation. So they decide that the rules that are going to govern their conference are the rules that they are there to destroy, which I've always found kind of ironic. The last one is interesting, secrecy. They're going to nail the windows closed, put guards on the door, and close the curtains. They don't want anyone to know. Everyone is sworn to secrecy. We don't know what happens behind those closed doors until the first accounts leak out in 1821. That guy only stayed for the first few months, so we don't know what actually happened until Madison dies. Madison publishes his works, and that's the first time we see everything. But he keeps his promise for secrecy. He doesn't release his notes until after he dies. It's held in the Pennsylvania State House. It's called at the time the Federal Convention, the Philadelphia Convention, or the Grand Convention. I told you 12 state governments are there. They have 30 to 40 delegates, but it's not the same delegates at the same time. People just are drifting in and drifting out. It's really bizarre. It's not like you would expect it to be. It's very informal, and you don't really know who's coming. All the great founding fathers come back, but you also have these new people who come in with different ideas. So it's kind of fun to watch the changing roles. They deliberate in secret for months. No one knows what's going on. Everyone's expecting, right up until the time they open the doors and let the light in, that they're going to give us something different on the articles. They don't. In mid-September, they reveal their work. It's a new constitution. It's signed by 39 of the most prominent men in the United States of America. Madison's notes, released much later, provide the only full record of what happened. And there it is, the U.S. Constitution. You've seen it before. Since 1952, it's been stored in the National Archives in these little pressure-sealed chambers. They lower them down into a safe at night, they bring them up at day, and they're guarded by National Archives guards 24/7. It's very impressive. It's a quiet, still place to be. It's very magical. So I encourage you to, in your lifetimes, try to get a chance to see that. And if you can, get to the Constitution Center in Washington, D.C., where every September 17th they have a forum of America's leading scholars on the Constitution. Many of them are represented in the books over there. Fascinating discussions. There's the document itself. It's 4 pages here. There's 5 pages overall. This is just a letter of transmittal, so only the 4 are on display in the National Archives. These things are less than 30 inches tall, about 2 feet across. They consist of 3,453 words. Average American can read that in a half an hour. With all the amendments, it's 7,590 words. You're up to now a full hour. So a full hour of your time to read America's charter document. I always wonder, when I hear people talk on the TV, my elected officials, I wonder if they've read this recently, because some of the things they say really are astounding. But nevertheless, FDR had this to say: I hope you have reread the Constitution of the United States in these past few weeks. Like the Bible, it ought to be read again and again. Yes, like the Bible, it ought to be read again and again. Every time you'll go through it, you're going to find something new, something exciting. We'll start with the preamble. If Madison had had his way, the original preamble would have been twice as long. He wanted to pull the body, that wonderful statement about all men created equal and governed by the people and all that stuff. He wanted to shove it on top of that. So we, the people, would have been midway through it. Well, the original draft is written by Governor Morris. You saw that in the Daughters of American Revolution. They had the question online, so I'm sure you got that one right. But he wrote the original preamble. It actually changes, though, as the Committee of Style is going through it, and eventually becomes this. Raise your hand if you had to memorize this in grade school. Yep. Now, do they still make you memorize it? I've got 2 no's from the youngest people in the room. So there's a one. Where do you go to school, sir? Dyer County. All right. So somebody's still memorizing it. So that's kind of nice. It's a beautiful word. And compare it to the Articles of Confederation last week. Basically, we are the states. Here are the articles. This one actually has something to say about our values. Now, one of the things I always focus in on, to form a more perfect union. Ladies and gentlemen, we are perfecting. We are not perfect. We are always working and striving to move forward. And you're part of that, Because basically, anytime you have a complaint about what I say up here, the problem, we the people. The fix, we the people. It's the answer to almost every question in government. If you don't like the way things are, change it. We the people can do that. We the people have done it in the past. And we the people can and will do it in the future. So there's a lot of power in we the people. It saddens me that so many people don't vote, that are apathetic about it. Get out, vote, and make yourselves heard. Talk to your friends about this stuff. Talk to them civilly, because it's exciting stuff. Again, it's family business. Who are we the people? We haven't figured that one out yet. The framers had an idea of we the people of the United States. Doesn't say citizens. If it said citizens, that'd be problematic, because we don't define citizens until much later in the 14th Amendment. It doesn't say voters, because then all the women, all the children, all the minorities wouldn't be voting. So it's just kind of grand, we the people. And to this day, even today, you can read it in papers, we're still having trouble deciding who is we the people and who is not we the people. So domestic tranquility, we're going to have a lot to say about domestic tranquility in this. We have dealt with riots and problems in the streets, and we're going to take care of that because people need to have safety. During the ratification process, which I'll discuss a little later, Americans found themselves debating the preamble more than everything, because they could get their arms around it. It was a small bit and so they were arguing this in the beer halls and the coffee shops, and that's quite frankly where the revolution is born, in beer halls and coffee shops. So this is how our Americans expressed themselves. They didn't have social media, thank you. They actually got together and talked face to face, and I guess over a brew it was kind of nice, because you could kind of turn to your glass if somebody insulted you. This was the first attempt, the first real attempt. It's the shortest constitution that exists for a modern state in the world right now, and it's the oldest democracy in the world right now. There's some other democracies that tried to come before. I talked in the second week about the ancient Greek, now the first week of the ancient Greek democracies. Those were limited to city-states, and they didn't last very long. The English structure law, which the framers admired so much, wasn't anchored in a constitution. So that was a problem for them. They couldn't use that example. Even the Declaration of Independence, which was so prominent in their people's mind, it wasn't voted by the people. We the people didn't vote for the Declaration. They didn't vote for the Articles. It was the state legislators who voted for that. They wanted to do this different. By securing our posterity, that is talking about we want to anchor this so it can last into the future. And so this is what they saw as a government. Now, they made rules on how you're going to change this. And they would be absolutely shocked to be here today and see how little we've done to change their document. We had 10 changes the first year this was out. Now, coming up on from 1787 to now is a long time, and we've done 27. We just are not good at changing this, and I'll talk more about that when I get to the ratification process. In the Bible, Moses comes down with the stone tablets, and the stone tablets are law, and you must obey, and you cannot change those. Most of these men believed in Moses. They believed in that instruction of law, but they didn't follow that example. They created laws you can change. This is government of the people, by the people, and for the people, and if the people don't like it, they can change it. They can even get rid of it. So this is a fascinating change from the Articles, which are perpetual and very difficult to change. I'll start with Article 1, the legislative branch. Why is it the first article? Because it's the premier position of government. The framers always thought that Congress would be the be-all, end-all. You can think of it kind of as they are the board of directors running this huge national company, and the executive is just hired as a CEO. And if he doesn't run it well, they'll fire him. That's how they saw this. Now, if that doesn't sound like the America you're living in today, that was we the people who allowed that. Because we the people have allowed Congress to secede a lot of its power to the executive branch. So it starts off with the line, all legislative powers shall be vested in Congress. The power to make the law makes this the premier branch of government. Section 2 opens by explaining how representatives in the House and lower are going to be chosen, and we talked in our questionnaire that members are chosen for the House every 2 years. They used to drink coffee different than we drink coffee today. Back in the framers' times, you'd pour the boiling cup of coffee into the cup, and then you had a saucer, which is a bowl shaped, and you would pour the hot coffee after you got your tea or your sugar and your cream in it. You'd pour it in the bowl. The bowl had a larger surface area, it would cool faster, and you would drink your coffee out of your saucer. So when they did this, they saw the House as the cup where the hot water. These people are coming in every 2 years and they're passionate. They're bringing in the passions of the people. And then we pour out those ideas, the bills that they create, into the Senate, which is there for 6 years. We elect a third of them every 2 years, and there it would cool off. And the Senate would be more resolute, more frozen chosen type of thing. That's how they saw it was going to go. Today, we see a lot of cantankerous people in both houses, which is really odd. We don't think of the Senate as calm anymore. These are the constitutional requirements to be a representative. You have to be at least 25 and 7 years a citizen, because we just started this country and a lot of these people are foreign born. Not such a problem today, but in the time it was a big deal. Senators had to be 30, 9 years a citizen. The president, 35. And at the time of adoption, 14 years a resident. So the question is, the trick question, have we ever had a foreign-born president?
Jackson?
No, they were born in America. And it's a trick question because we did. This guy is Arthur St. Clair. Arthur St. Clair, I know all the daughters of the American Revolution, sons of the American Revolution know him because he's the guy who basically walked away from the battle at Ticonderoga when he was surrounded on the hilltops by the British. It was a smart thing to do. If he'd stayed, he'd been annihilated, but his reputation really suffered for that. Later on, he's going to lead the American army up into the Indiana Territory, and they're going to be slaughtered by the Indians, and his reputation is going to suffer again. But for a brief time, he made news because he was he's Scottish born, and he becomes president of the Congress, which is the president at the time, under the Articles of Confederation. You're only foreign-born president. Arthur St. Clair. He was president for from the 2nd of February to the 4th of November. It wasn't a long term. The legislative branch. This is how we're going to determine those. Determined by adding the whole number of free persons, including those bound to service for a term of years, indentured servants, and excluding Indians because they're not taxed and they're not citizens anyway, and we're not going to resolve that for a long time. And 3/5 of all other persons. Who are the other persons? Slaves, absolutely. They're not indentured servants because the articles have already gone. The 1661 Virginia law changed their status from indentured service to slaves. It made it race-based slavery. That's where it starts. And we're going to go ahead and change it. Modified by Section 2 of the 14th Amendment, which now is going to count those people and give them the vote. Which brings up the important question, slavery in the Constitution. I was talking to somebody before this began, and like most people who study our history, how did this happen? Some people call it our original sin. It is, but you already see changes underway. You already see people who are having a moral dilemma over slavery in their new nation. And I want to talk about that because this is the way that America works. We see something wrong and we fix it. Sometimes it takes a long time. But some people saw it early and they started to fix it early. 1775, you have the first anti-slavery society in Philadelphia, and that society is Quaker. Because Quakers have a very, very contemporary Christian view that we're all loved by God. And so if I love God and I'm supposed to love my neighbor, it doesn't matter what color, sex, etc., whatever. 1787, Massachusetts judges and juries in slavery there. It's not the legislator, it's the way that they run their courts. They're basically adjudicating the law. Gradual emancipation approaches in Pennsylvania by 1780. All slave children will be freed by the time they're 28 years old. Connecticut and Rhode Island say, yeah, that's a good idea. We'll do that too. 1784, the Confederate Congress nearly banned slavery, but they don't do it because they're stopped by other forces. But in 1787, they banned it in the Northwest Territory. That act in the Northwest Territory that I talked about last week, that's a huge thing. They describe how cities are going to be laid out, and cities west of the Mississippi are all laid out that way because we followed that example. They talked about public education, but they also said there's not going to be any slavery there. And that's where you start to see this divide between North and South. 1788, 10 most northerly states have already banned slave inputs. North Carolina imposes a ban on imports, which may be altruistic, it may be economic, and we'll talk about that later. South Carolina suspends participation in importation. Again, it may be economic. I want to bring this up because a lot of people say, did no one get it? You know, we always study Jefferson. I used to give tours of Monticello, Jefferson's home. It's a lot of fun in Virginia, but nevertheless, Jefferson never got it. This guy got it. Robert Carter III, 1728 to 1804. He's an American planter. He lives in Northern Virginia. He's the largest manumission in U.S. history prior to the Civil War. He's spurred by his Christian beliefs, much as the Quakers were. He suddenly wakes up and realizes this is wrong, I can't do this. He goes to the courthouse, he frees some slaves. His neighbors and his family get very upset with him. He frees more. I guess it's kind of the thumb in your nose at the family. By 5 September 1791, he's starting on this project. Before he's done, he will free 500 slaves, the largest manumission of slaves prior to the Civil War. He was a Southern planter. So not everybody failed to get the memo. Slavery in England, which is where we're taking a lot of our examples, is going a different direction than we went, and they went a lot faster. 1772, slavery is made illegal. You can't own slaves in England. However, as we know now, the slave trade is being run. It's being run by the royal family. So how are we going to get rid of that? Slave trade in and out of the British Empire is outlawed by 1807. It's outlawed because individuals stand up and say, this is awful, and I'll get to one of those in just a second. But it's the same as here, is we the people. We the people of England rose up and said, this is wrong, we need to stop this. And they did it, and they did it without a war. 1833, the abolition of slavery ends across the entire empire. You can't even do this in the island nations anymore. Now, one of the people who's responsible for this is this guy, Ignatius Sancho, nicknamed the Extraordinary Negro, I kid you not. Sancho's born on a slave ship. He comes to England. He is raised by people who don't believe that black people are different than white people. They teach him to read, they teach him to sing, they teach him to draw. He writes, he draws, he sings. They put him on tour. He goes all over England touring as the Extraordinary Negro. He stands up and recites poetry, answers questions, and participates in debates. He changes minds, because people realize that the man, he looks different than me, but he's probably smarter than me, or at least as smart, and they go up and meet him, and that's what it takes. Eugene Robinson, before he died, wrote a wonderful book. It's called Disintegration, talking about the disintegration of the black culture within the United States of America. And he talks about how it can come back together again and how it can come back together with white America. And Eugene cites case after case and case, and he says the only thing that works, the only thing that ever works, is people living and working together so that they can meet each other, talk, and realize that there's no differences. Sancho was proving that way back then. This is William Blake's drawing. It's pretty horrendous. William Blake illustrated a book that was about slavery, the first book in English about slavery, written by a slave who'd participated in it. This is some of the things that the person saw. Those outraged English people as they saw those horrific paintings. And the last guy I want to talk to you about is Wilberforce. You've probably heard that name before. They made a movie about him. Wilberforce is the star of a movie called Amazing Grace. He's also star of a book, Amazing Grace. It's written by Eric Metaxas. If ever you feel there's something wrong, defective about humanity, that there's something wrong with people, that we just don't get it, I urge you to read that book. This is a man who's born to privilege. He's insanely wealthy. He walks onto a slave ship. He smells it. He walks on to see what it is. He sees it, and he says, this cannot stand. And he launches, with his dear friend Pitt, the prime minister, he launches a campaign to get rid of it. He dies 3 days after Guarantee's ordinance, so he gets to see his work actually embodied. But it's an amazing story, and it's one that we need to kind of champion. He's driven by his faith. That's why the book's Amazing Grace. One of the people who inspires him is the guy who wrote the song. But nevertheless, I encourage you to read that book. And if you can't read the book, see the movie. Movie's a bad way to do history, I have to tell you. But that movie does a pretty good job. The word slave and slavery are absent in the Constitution. It was too controversial. The people who wanted it in there wanted it to enforce their right to have slaves, and the other people didn't want to give them that right, so they just talked around it. Article 1 bars Congress from extending its trade regulating power to affect slaves prior to 1808. That was done hoping that after 1808 we would squeeze the neck and the institution of slavery would slowly die off. It doesn't. I'll explain why later. They do the three-fifths compromise. It provides a perverse incentive, though, to own slaves. Because if I get 5 more slaves, I can get another person's vote. And so they keep pulling back in and get 3 more people's vote. So they actually want to grow. And so we see that early in the Republic, most of our presidents are from the South. Slavery meant extra seats in the Electoral College, and that's why. Pro-slavery presidents could appoint pro-slavery judges so they could kind of protect themselves. We're going to see the pro-slavery judge, Robert Taney, is going to make the Dred Scott decision. I'll talk about that next week. Generally regarded to be the worst decision in Supreme Court history, but Taney comes from the South. He comes from the slave-owning culture. He doesn't see any problem with his ruling that Dred Scott is not a citizen. Article 4, free states are obliged to return runaway slaves. It's going to be a real problem for the Quakers in Pennsylvania, because the return to slave is going to be a violation of their moral code, their religious beliefs. And so slaves are going to come to Pennsylvania, and the Quakers are going to send them north to Canada where they can be safe. Imposed no immediate or long-term restrictions on slaveholding on federal property. That's going to change. It's going to come, eventually we're going to take it off federal property. It's interesting, I hope you know, if you shoot somebody in the post office, it's federal crime, that's federal property. It's not a state crime. That's a different territory. So when you get on federal property, things change. And they're going to eventually outlaw it on federal property. Exempted international slave trade from constitutional amendment. I'll talk about that a little later. Senate of the United States shall be composed of 2 senators chosen by the legislature. This is where we have 2 representatives from each state, okay, and we're going to have the House represented by population. Now, the small states wanted 2 for everything. And the big states want a population for anything. And of course, Roger Sherman comes up from Connecticut and does the great compromise and says, nah, we'll have both. We'll have a bicameral form of government. And most of the states have followed that except for Nebraska. If you've ever lived in Nebraska, they have a unicameral form of government. It has worked fairly well for them. But nevertheless, everybody else followed this example of bicameral. But prior to the 17th Amendment, in 1912, we elected representatives, and the representatives selected our senators. We weren't qualified to elect senators because under the republic system, you have representatives who do the decision making for you, and we had the Senate picked by the House, we had the president picked by the Electoral College. And this was because we'd hoped that the most educated people would rise to those positions. But this is where we get the direct election of senators. The times, places, and manner of holding elections for senators and representatives shall be prescribed by each state. You're hearing a lot now about who runs the elections and people complaining about various things in the elections. This says it's a state matter. However, but the Congress may at any time, by law, make changes to alter such regulations. So the federal government can do something about it. So the federal government has established the election day, and the states run the election. You may see Congress step forward and try to change the rules. That will directly affect our federal relationship. And how the federal relationship works is you have the federal government, which is a sovereign state, and you have the state government within states. So it's a sovereignty within a sovereignty. It's the only place in the world where it has worked, but it has always caused problems for us. If you remember, the Civil War was called the War for States' Rights. That was the belief that the subordinate sovereignty should be at least equal to or greater than the overarching sovereignty. Congress shall assemble at least once each year, meeting on the first Monday in December, in the year after the election. So if you were voted out of office in November of year 1, you served until December of year 2. So when they changed that, it was to get rid of that, because they didn't want people who were disgruntled for being voted out of office to have that much power for that long. Now it begins on noon on the 3rd day of January. Each house shall be the judge of elections, return the qualifications of its own members. They'll set their own rules. And we've seen that, and we've seen them change their rules rather dramatically overnight to allow different things to happen. But this is what gives them the power. They're not bound by anything. It's basically when you were a kid and you found some boxes and you built a fort, and then you decided you built a club and you would not let the boys or the girls into your club, and then you made rules. That's these guys. They got permission to do that, to go behind closed doors and make their own rules. The majority of each shall constitute a quorum to do business. You saw that in the Texas legislature this year, where some of the people left so they couldn't have a quorum. That's they copied that from the U.S. Constitution into their Constitution, and that's how they used it to try to stop the vote that they didn't want to take. The Congress can compel their attendance, just as Texas tried to do, in such manner and under such penalties as each house may provide. They can set the penalties. Each house may determine the rules of its proceeding, punish its members for disorderly behavior, and with the concurrence of 2/3, expel a member. When is the last time we expelled a member? Remember him? Yep. George Santos was expelled just a few years ago. Before that, it was 21 years earlier. He was a Republican 21 years before that. We expelled the Democrat from Pennsylvania. But they can do that. Neat. Isn't that odd? Yeah. Years ago, when I was teaching this class, there was a survey that came out that was rating the people, and I was teaching to military group. Military came up very near the top of the survey for American respect. Congress came very low. Congress came out lower than head lice and cockroaches. So I don't think that the survey was that scientific, because I don't really think head lice and cockroaches should have been on the survey. But it was a neat survey to show. Each house shall keep a journal of its proceedings, excepting such parts of made judgment require secrecy. So they're allowed to have secret sessions. Those secret sessions are not bound for a specific purpose. Normally we think of is to protect national secrets. However, some of the secret sessions have clearly been for political reasons. That's too bad. What we want is that sunshine law. We want everything out in the open that can be out in the open. Because we, the people, want to know. And if we, the people, don't know, we can't make the best decisions. Neither house during the session Congress shall, without consent of the other, adjourn for more than 3 days. This came up about a year ago, where the House wanted to leave early, and somebody pointed out in the Constitution, said, well, you can't. You got to stay until this time. Senators and representatives shall receive a compensation for their services. Every time we get into an article in the Constitution, it's going to talk about the fact that you have these people get pay. Why? Because the framers did not want only rich people who could afford to do this full-time coming to Washington. They wanted to make sure that you get a sufficient living wage so you could do this. So there's a specificity to the wage. Today, a U.S. Senator makes $174,000. A representative also makes $174,000. Party leader, the two party leaders in the House and Senate get $194,000, and the Speaker of the House gets a $50,000 differential, as does the President pro tempore of the Senate. Session House, and in going to and returning from the same, any speech, debate, and House, they shall not be questioned at any other place. They can't be arrested as they're moving, and the reason they can't be arrested is because back in the old days, if somebody was going to vote for something you didn't like, you just kind of slow them down a bit, you know. Looks like the tail light's out on your horse, sir. You're going to have to stay in town for a couple days, you know. So they said, no, you can't do that. You put up the credentials, I am a U.S. House or a senator, and they have to let you go. No senator shall, during the time in which he was elected, be appointed to any civil office. You can't have a civil office and be a senator at the same time. I haven't seen anybody try to bend that rule in a long time. No person holding any office shall be a member of House, Senate during his continuance in office. Focus on what you're supposed to do. Every bill which shall pass, and this tells how to do a bill. The bill comes up, we pass through the House, we send it over Senate, it goes to the President. You know how that goes. You know how it goes because if you're my age, he told you. Yeah. This is, and I have it on my computer and I could run it, but I have to shut it down and I'm afraid it won't start again. But nevertheless, this is really accurate information. And if you're trying to tell your kids how laws are formed, that is a great way to tell kids how laws are formed. There's only one problem with it. If you'll remember from the cartoon, and you can kind of see it there, he's sitting by himself, right? Yeah, that's not how it really goes. I'm trying to find out the number here of bills. There are 9,843 bills currently sitting on the slate to be considered. So Bill was sitting by himself in the cartoon. He's got 9,400 of his closest friends who are sitting there with him. And the way Congress works, 437, probably 9,400 are going to sit there in the rain, you know, because Congress doesn't move fast and it doesn't move particularly well. Harry Truman called his Congress the do-nothing Congress. We've beaten that record. I have that YouTube video again. If you want to find it, you can find it on YouTube, and it's a great video. The Congress shall have the power to lay and collect taxes. One of the foundational problems with the Articles of Confederation was that they couldn't have taxes. We fixed that one. Provide for the common defense, general welfare of the United States, right out of the Articles. To borrow money on credit. Well, that's nice. We're getting good at that, aren't we? We're borrowing money. And who are we borrowing it from? Our potential adversaries. I'm not sure how that works. To regulate commerce with foreign nations and among the several states and within the Indian tribes, exactly what Washington wanted when he had his convention. To establish uniform rule of naturalization, uniform laws on the subject of bankruptcies, hadn't been done before. So we finally have that fixed. Coin money, and the states can't coin money. We used to have, if you read the wonderful book about going across America at the time, I'm trying to think of his name, it'll come to me. But nevertheless, if you read this book about this guy who's traveling there, he laughs because he stops at a bar and he pays the guy, and the guy opens up this shoebox and starts pulling out different money from all the different states, colonies, cities, and Britain, and asks him how he wants his change. Yeah. So to bribe for the punishment, counterfeiting securities, to establish post offices. Post offices used to be a big thing. You weren't a nation unless you had a post office. And so this is kind of your entry fee, is you're going to have post office. Now we're talking about post offices, moving away, going away. A lot of small towns are losing their post offices. Really sad. Tariffs. And have the power for duties and tariffs. What are duties and tariffs? Tariffs are a tax paid by consumers. That's right out of the Wikipedia definition. You ultimately pay it. Of a given country imposed by the government of that country or customs territory, supranational nations or imports on exports of goods. How it works is the government, our government, passes a tariff, which says if I import something, we'll say a pair of shoes, if that pair of shoes, $10, has a 50% tariff, now I have to pay the government $5. Where's that coming from? Normally you'll go to the consumer and ask to be reimbursed for it by raising the price of the shoes to $15. That's normally how tariffs work. Tariffs have served two purposes in our country's history. Source of income, and it was the main source of income up until the time that we got an income tax, which is World War I, and to protect domestic producers. And that's a biggie. If we have cheap goods coming in that are wiping out American manufacturing or American agriculture, we want to fix that. It's addressed twice in the Constitution. Congress will have the power to lay enough to collect tariffs, and in Article 10, Clause 2, that said states don't. Framers understood tariffs as a national economic concern reserved for the legislative branch of government. The legislative branch of government. So what happened? It was the main source of government until the Civil War. Treasury notes and wartime incomes, in the Civil War, they passed an income tax. It was abolished right after that. Still, Abraham Lincoln loved tariffs. Lincoln was a Whig guy. He was a Henry Clay guy, and Henry Clay was a tariff guy. So Lincoln's going to push tariffs. He's going to sign 3 tariff bills during the Civil War. He's also going to run for re-election. A lot of people today say, well, we're in a national emergency. We can't do that. Lincoln did everything in the national emergency. He ran the government. He consulted his generals in the field. He signed the edict for the Transcontinental Railway because he knew after the war that would pull America together east to west. He's a man way ahead of his time. The only president we have who owned a patent. He built a steamship that could crawl over mud banks. He's an absolutely amazing man. Every 5 years, historians are questioned to vote for the presidents. Lincoln almost always comes in first. Occasionally, he's edged out by George Washington, and then the third is always FDR. So if you ever want to know who your greatest presidents are, according to American Historical Society, it's Lincoln, Washington, and FDR, normally in that order. Then you had McKinley, Mr. Tariff. Donald Trump likes tariffs, and he talks about tariffs a lot. He also talks about McKinley, which is why he renamed Mount McKinley, Mount McKinley. He followed this man very closely. This man is the moneymaker for the American economy during the Gilded Age. And the Gilded Age relied heavily on tariffs for income, and that's what we see. He passed very high tariffs, sometimes bordering on 50%, 49%, and ultimately, though, it didn't work for him. Things started to collapse in the economy. By the end of McKinley's times, he was a free trade man. He had abandoned that. He said that protectionism is not good, free trade is good. 1913, we have the 16th Amendment. Congress may have the power to lay and collect taxes, and that's 1913, so now we don't need tariffs anymore. Then you see something start to happen interesting in 1930. Tariff Act in 1930, Smoot-Hawley is what that's normally called, and you know about that one. The Depression is bad. Cheap goods are coming in, American workers are unemployed. What if we just shut down those cheap goods with high tariffs? Well, no one American can afford to pay the differential. And on top of that, when we stop those imports coming in, we stop manufacturing exports because no one will reciprocal tariffs come on, and the economy starts to collapse. It's a disaster. Smoot, Hawley, and the guy who signed it, Herbert Hoover, are all voted out of office the next time because it is so bad. The 1934 Reciprocal Trade Agreement Act turns over power from Congress to the president. He can lower tariffs indiscriminately by himself without having to go back to Congress. 1962, Section 232 of the Trade Expansion Act allows the president to set tariffs on his own without consulting Congress in the event of national emergency. Donald Trump is going to use this when he passes tariffs on aluminum and steel. That's what he's going to cite. 1974 Trade Act, Section 301. He's going to reference that again. This is giving the president more power. So what you're seeing here is the president didn't seize power. Congress gave the president the power that they had under the Constitution. Now, in 2021, there was bicameral legislation, and the two guys who, Pat Toomey and Mark Warner, got together in the Toomer-Warner bill, and they tried to pull the power back and say, at least let us define what is an emergency, and that did not pass. But I think you're going to see this. If we continue down the tariff road, Congress is eventually going to start squawking and point to the Constitution and say, we want our power back. Legislative branch proposed the progress of science. That's neat. They knew that they needed some patents. They needed to protect this new stuff that was coming in. Because you get these great inventions like this that you've got to protect. So you can get a patent for that and protect that. And that's the way that they're seeing ahead in the future. And they're also seeing tribunals and jurors to the Supreme Court. The Congress has the responsibility to invent the court system, to declare war, grant letters of marque, basically grant letters that allow you to be a pirate, and make rules concerning capture of land and water, raise and support armies. No appropriation of money to that use shall be used for a longer term than 2 years. Have you ever worked in the military? Have you ever seen their financial system? This is why it's so screwed up. It takes about 12 years to build a good aircraft carrier, but you can only budget for 2. How's that work? Not too good. So we have not figured out how to do this yet, and that's why when you keep seeing people point at the Department of Defense and say, you guys have not passed an audit in 15 years or longer, depending on which record you go, this is why. They haven't figured out how to budget for the Department of Defense yet, and they still haven't figured it out. Half of the budget is in the dark side, it's classified, and so you can't tell the accountant what's in there. You just say, well, we put $4 billion in there for what? Can't tell you. It's really, really hard. For a short time, they hired a chief executive officer type to go and work in D.C. She called me in and had me do some projects for her. It was fascinating to watch. She was foundering from the first day. The system is not built to work. To provide and maintain a Navy, same as the Army, to make rules for the government of those forces, and to provide for calling forth the militia. And we had all those different types of soldiers over the years. They have controlled those. I can tell you that the framers did not like a standing army. The standing army had worked against them in the Revolution. And one of the reasons they make it so complicated is because they don't want another standing army to rise up and take over. And the first time we really pulled the militia together was when Aaron Burr, and you hear a lot about Aaron Burr, next week you'll see him shoot Hamilton, but he was vice president for a short period of time, but one of the things that he's really well known for is he wanted to go into the Louisiana Purchase, establish some territory, and create his own nation. He's tried for treason for this, and this is why the militia is enacted to stop Aaron Burr from doing this horrible thing. A nice looking fellow though, you got to give him that. Photogenic. We created the Insurrection Act in 1807. The Insurrection Act was invented in case we had to basically nationalize the militia and send it to stop some crime. One of the times that it was used in 1932 is when these veterans from World War I came back. They were promised a bonus. That bonus was supposed to be paid in 1945. When the Depression hit, they were starving, so they came and they marched on Washington, D.C. to get their bonus early. And we didn't want them to do that, so they called out the Guard and they nationalized it. They put it under charge of Douglas MacArthur. Douglas MacArthur with tanks run by George Patton, and Ike Eisenhower is also in on this operation. No one's got their hands clean in this one. They actually roll and push these guys out of D.C. Now the president told them don't cross the river and burn the camps. So MacArthur crossed the river and burned camps. Why not? But nevertheless, we've used the Insurrection Act just a few times in our history. One of the times we used it is 68 years ago today for the Little Rock 7, Little Rock 9. You're familiar with the Little Rock 9, the little black kids who are going to the Central High School. They're stopped because the Arkansas governor nationalizes or puts the state National Guard around there. Dwight D. Eisenhower nationalized the National Guard. That doesn't work really well. So he calls in the 101st Airborne. If you've ever talked to those people who were there, a little black girl marching beside 101st Airborne guys on both sides were armed with machine guns, she said it was extraordinarily intimidating. And you have to give it to those people for the courage they showed in walking into those schools. And life wasn't good once they were in those schools, I can tell you that. They will exercise legislation in all cases whatsoever over the District of Columbia. District of Columbia is back in the news now. Who's running it? Well, they can exercise the legislation. Migration or importation of such persons in states now existing, okay, they're talking about slaves. You can't do it until 1808. We're basically putting a 20-year moratorium on canceling slavery. Why? Well, the abolitionists are hoping we'll squeeze it off and it'll die. And they are almost right. Slavery almost dies in the United States of America and is economically infeasible until the creation of the cotton gin. Suddenly, cotton just roars and slavery comes back to life. And the South doesn't fight this. And they don't fight this because the value of the homegrown slave product is now so valuable that imports are competing with them. They don't want cheap imports. I kid you not. So when you're talking about this morality, somebody asked about slavery before we got started, and I said, when you think about slavery and you're talking about the framers, yes, they're brilliant people, they're geniuses, they're thinking with their head. Morality is kind of thinking with your heart and spirit. And so we're not there yet. Privileges of the writ of habeas corpus shall not be suspended unless when cases of rebellion or invasion. Earlier they asked you, whose power is this? So the legislative power. Lincoln reached across, bent the rules, and grabbed it during the Civil War. He was chastised for it. Congress kind of covered up for him, and they passed basically the Habeas Corpus Act, which allowed him to do that for the period of the Civil War where it was put down again. Nevertheless, the South accused him of burning the Constitution with all the acts that he was passing, which bent the rules. He will not be the first president to bend the rules. Wait till we get to FDR next week. No tax or duty shall be laid that we can't have individual tariffs from the states. No money shall be drawn from the Treasury, except we keep an account of that. And you can actually see the accounts. The accounts are online. They tend to come with these little caveats that basically say we can't verify this information is accurate. That's in business, that's failing an audit. Our government has failed audits consistently. The Department of Defense at least going back 15 years. No title of nobility shall be granted by the United States. So we aren't going to have princes and barons and all the things that they have overseas. Later on, we're going to have an act to try to make sure that we can't accept them from foreign powers as well. Section 10. No state can enter a treaty or alliance or confederation with another power on their own. That was happening prior to this. Now we're going to make sure that, nope, this is only for the legislator. And no state shall, without the consent of Congress, lay any duty, tonnage, keep troops, ships of war in times of peace, because again, they were setting up military and putting them on each other's borders. The executive branch. All the executive power shall lie with the President of the United States. What is the executive power? Well, that's that managerial power I told you. There's a board of directors, and there's the executive, who's basically running things, managing for you day to day. Each state shall appoint a number of electors. There's the Electoral College. Back in the 90s, when I used to do this type of presentation for senior executives, this is always what they focused on as the next constitutional crisis. We've had several crises since then. This isn't one of them, but it's coming. Right now, we have a minority party in the United States. When the parties become about equal, you're going to start to see this come up again. It's a problem. Presidents use these tools, the executive orders, executive actions, to basically do the things that they need to do to manage the executive. It's rules, it's your manual, it's your owner's manual for your corporation. Executive orders are only binding upon the executive branch of government. They don't affect you. The proclamations do affect you, but they're non-binding whatsoever. Proclamation is National Toadstool Day or whatever. Presidential memorandums or semi-executive orders are not they're not always published, and this is kind of a memorandum about what I'm doing. So what about these executive orders? Boy, you hear a lot about executive orders, don't you? George Washington had 8. His first executive order was send me reports on this topic. And that's where all the government reports started from. When you look down the list, William Henry Harrison 0, Garfield 6, then you get to Theodore Roosevelt with 1081. Everybody thought he was trying to rule from the executive branch. They got really, really upset. They were going to get more upset when Calvin Coolidge, 1,203, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, 3,723, holding the record, still number 1, writing executive orders right and left. The executive orders, they do adjust how the executive government, the side of government, the executive branch is run. They don't affect the people writ large. They are not law. So they're really, really interesting. If you're wondering, as of Monday, Donald Trump had 202. He's nowhere near a contender for the award. Some of his EOs have been spurred people to be upset. I can tell you some of their EOs spurred people to be upset. This is nothing new. People get upset when they're told to do stuff. Concerns started over TR's 1081. They grew further over FDR. His first inaugural address is really interesting. I think I have that here. Basically, our Constitution is malleable. We can stretch it. We can bend it. And if we have to, we'll just go ahead and break it. And he says this in his first inaugural address. Congress is really upset. When the Supreme Court starts to shoot down some of the things he's doing, he says, I'll pack the court. Constitution doesn't tell me how many justices I have. I got 9, I'll put 12 on there. And if I don't get my vote my way, I'll put 15. And if that doesn't work, I'll put 18. They back down, they start retiring off the bench. But nevertheless, this is where all that starts. It's nothing new. Court packing, fireside chat, the executive office of the president is created. The president's staff starts off up until FDR is fairly small. They got a little office over in Congress where they work. They got a bigger office in the White House. All the stuff of the supersized staff is going to start with FDR, and it's going to grow and grow and grow. Term becomes popular with publication, The Imperial Presidency of Arthur Schlesinger's book in the 1970s. You hear it a lot now about the imperial presidency. The power of the presidency has gotten too big. And invariably, you can point back to the fact that Congress gave them the power because they didn't want it, because they're politically liable for the bad decisions that are made. Vote the president out and I'll stay here for 40 years. That's kind of been Congress's way. Who's allowed that? We the people. We the people are term limits. I know a lot of people want term limits. We the people can set those term limits. We just vote them out of office. Congressional activity. We have 11 September 2001 attacks. George Bush basically takes some incredible powers under the War Powers Act. We have congressional resistance to Barack Obama comes in, and Trump versus United States given the immunity decision just recently. Is the immunity decision anything different than we had before? Not really. Not really. We have not seen past presidents tried for the decisions that they're making inside the Oval Office. That has not happened. Okay, so this is new. Now, how they were going to stretch and bend that to try to justify certain behaviors, I don't know. But presidents have always been fairly well protected for their official acts. There's a theory now called the unitary executive. It's going around. It's basically all executive power, which means that basically, and it's come up over who can fire whom. We have Congress set up these independent agencies, and Trump wants to fire some of those independent agencies. Under executive power, he has sole power over all the executive. He can do so. So far, the Supreme Court has not ridden along that train with him. Some things they've said yes to, and some things they said no. You can't discern exactly where the hatchet's going to fall. But it seems right now the unitary executive theory is just a concept. In every case, after the choice of president, the person having the greatest number of votes will be vice president. So we'd have President Trump and Vice President Kamala Harris. How would that work? It didn't work very well in 1796 when we had President John Adams, who was a Federalist, and we had Democratic Republican Thomas Jefferson as his assistant. Thomas Jefferson was the vice president, was for states' rights. Adams was for national. Jefferson ran against Adams in 1800, generally regarded as one of the nastiest elections in American history. Jefferson called Adams a hermaphrodite and said he was a bedwetter. And Adams told that Jefferson was sleeping with his Negro slaves and producing offspring, which was true, but he said a lot of other bad things about him. Very, very cantankerous. The men didn't talk to each other for another 25 years. For vice president, we're going to run president and vice president each side. This is before political parties, by the way. Madison said, someday you're going to have factions, political parties. He warned us. That would be a very bad thing. Don't allow that to happen. President shall, at stated times, receive service compensation. He gets paid too. He gets $400,000 as of 2021. Before he enters the execution office, he'll take the following oath. He has to take an oath. That oath doesn't end with "So help me God." Some people say that was added by George Washington. That's not true. He kissed the Bible. That is true. The guy who said that he said "So help me God" was Washington Irving. Washington Irving was 6 when Washington was inaugurated. I don't think he remembers. Nevertheless, by the 20th century, everyone's saying it is now customary that most people say, "So help me God." They don't have to, nor do they have to swear. They can affirm if they're true Lutherans. Martin Luther wasn't for oaths. President shall be Commander-in-Chief of the Army and Navy and the militia of several states when called into service. So he's the chief executive. He's running military operations too. You see that really well in Abraham Lincoln. He shall have the power by advice and consent to make treaties, provide. So he's basically America's face forward. He can go over and be our chief. He's not just our chief executive. He's not just a commander-in-chief. He is our chief diplomat. He shall from time to time give Congress a State of the Union. There are three magic moments in our political calendar. The State of the Union is one of them. That's where your framers said that the president should stand up and say how the business is doing. I admit that some of those speeches aren't worth watching. They get too political. But it's a moment when we can see into the heart of our government, and that's what it's supposed to be. Two other times are Inauguration Day, when we have the peaceful transfer of power, which is a magic moment, regardless of who wins. That's a magic moment. And the fact that we get to vote, Election Day. Care that the laws be faithfully. He's the chief law enforcement officer. Donald Trump said that just the other day. I am the chief law enforcement officer, and he is. That's his job. Congress makes the laws, he enforces the laws. So what is executive privilege and where is it in the Constitution? It's not. It's not. It's not written anywhere. It's the authority of the president to withhold documents or information in possession to keep things secret so he can do his job. Where is it? It's not in the Constitution. It derives from the separation of powers. In making judgments and reaching decisions, presidents and their advisors must be free to discuss. So the Supreme Court made a decision, and the Supreme Court said, we derive this power out of the other powers that he's given, and they have a changing nature. It used to be absolute. Absolutely no one could break this. In the last 40 years, since Richard Nixon, we started to see where Congress can subpoena things, and you'll remember the subpoena of the Watergate tapes. That's where this broke. That's where we started to see a more limited use of executive privilege.
All but 18 minutes.
All but 18 minutes. But the secretary hit her knee against the erase button for 18 minutes. Go figure. Yeah, judicial branch. The judicial power of the United States vests in one court, such inferior courts as Congress may create. They are going to create that the very next year, going to do the judiciary law and create the courts that still exist today. They created a great system for us. The judicial power shall extend to all cases in law and equity arising under the Constitution, laws of the United States, and treaties made. This is basically telling what power that they're going to hold. In cases affecting ambassadors, other public ministers, and those in which a state shall be a party, the Supreme Court shall have initial jurisdiction. It doesn't have to rise to them. They can step in and take the case immediately. You used to see a lot more of that. You don't so much anymore. Trial of all crimes except cases of impeachment shall be by jury, and such trial should be held in the state where said crimes have occurred. So you can't pick your location. You go to where the crime occurred. State relationships. Full faith and credit shall be given in each state to the public acts, records, judicial proceedings of every other state. Years ago, when marijuana became public, permissible in Colorado, they asked me in the class, they said, does this mean it'll be in the nation? I said, yes. And they said, how do you know that? Because if I can do it in one state, and it's not allowed in every state, then you're going to have a problem. People are going to move from one state to another to do the things that they wish to do. This is always a problem for states who want to have different sets of rules. Ultimately, we tend to always go with the national. Right now, we have different rules for different things, but you will eventually see we always come together. That's the constitutional journey we're on. And the citizens of one state are entitled to the privileges elsewhere. They can travel there. A person charged in any state with treason, felony, or other crime who shall be flee from justice and be found a state, they have to be removed to the state having jurisdiction in the crime. And they're also talking about slaves in this time. New states may be admitted by the Congress into this union, but no state shall be formed or erected within jurisdiction of another state. How does that work out? Well, you may have heard of this state. This is the state of Jefferson in Northern California, Southern Oregon, which is trying to secede and create its own state because they say that they're not represented. When did this start? Shortly after the gold rush of 1849. They're not making progress, but nevertheless, they're doing this. This is another state you may have heard of. Are you familiar with the state of Franklin? State of Franklin was headquartered over at Greenburg over there at the site of right up against the North Carolina border. North Carolina was deeply in debt. It seceded some of its territory to the federal government. These people said, oh, we'll take it. They wanted to start their government, and they lasted as an independent government for 4.5 years until North Carolina suddenly said, we're going to take it back. Congress wasn't sure what to do. They kind of did a coin toss. North Carolina was there first, so they took Congress, and Congress went back with North Carolina. But nevertheless, for a brief period of time, Knoxville was in the Free State of Franklin. These are other states that are trying to form across the United States today. Some are fun. They're all entertaining stories, I can tell you. Nevertheless, you can trace back any of these to their source. It's basically unhappy people. Everywhere I've been, and I've been to all these locations, the only one that actually is different is UP, the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. Those people are distinctly different. They are different. Unless you spend a lot of time in Canada, you'll not know why, but nevertheless, they're distinctly different. Okay, the United States shall guarantee to every state a Republican form of government, and we do. Every state that comes in has got to have a Republican form of government. We don't take states out of other states. We don't just pull them out because they're unhappy, and that's why we haven't seen those other states created, except West Virginia. During the Civil War, the Army occupied Northern Virginia, and they moved in, and those people said, we'd really like to be part of the North, not the South. And they said, well, you have slaves. And they said, well, yeah, but we'd really like to be part of the North. We really don't want to be on the receiving end of the Union Army. They negotiate with Lincoln. Lincoln makes a deal with them, change your constitution to get rid of slavery eventually, and we will take you into be a state. They got their representatives together, and they voted in Wheeling, West Virginia. They decided they would become West Virginia. Virginia didn't have anything to say about it. It was sucked out in 1863 and became its own state. So we violated the Constitution more than once during the Civil War, but because of that, you have that wonderful song by John Denver about West Virginia. Okay, amending the Constitution, this is how we can amend it. Right now there's a group that's trying to change the Constitution. They call themselves the Convention of States. What it is the Constitution allows you to go through state legislatures and go through conventions. The Convention of States people say, let's go through convention like they did it the first time and get it right. We've never done this before. It takes 34 states, 38 states to ratify still, so there's your breaking point right there, because you probably not get 38, but nevertheless, it's founded in 2013 and it's pushing for a convention. This is what they're trying to do. Term limitations, things that sound really good. Fiscal restraints, maybe a balanced budget. How's it coming? This is how many people have signed on so far. 17 active legislators, 18 have passed the COS resolution, and 4 have passed in one chamber. Are they going to get enough? I don't know. I don't know if they are or not, but it's a pretty exciting development. This is we the people grabbing the Constitution and trying to make change. The pros, it's revolutionary. More likely to actually propose amendments. Still requires 38 states, safety net. Education would likely spur the public because people would be excited by this. They'd come out, they'd want to go to these rallies and find out what's going on. And it reemphasizes state power, which a lot of people think has been kind of taken away by the federal government. Cons, it's an unfamiliar process. This ain't going to be riddled with lawsuits. It's hard to establish. It's likely to be blocked by 16 or 17 states who are not going to go there. They like the current system, much like Rhode Island. Likely unlimited in aims, uncertainty, and lack of controls. People say this is what we're going to try to do. Once they get into the tent, maybe they're going to try to do something else, like social change. Politicize further, which is alienating factions. If one side picks this up and runs with it, if it becomes a red ball or a blue ball, then it's going to be fought, obviously. This is amending. This is how we do it. Provided no amendment which be made prior to the year 1808 for slavery. That's the only amendment that's the only thing that they can't amend, is that rule. It goes away. It's not a problem. South is building their own slave empire. They don't need imports anymore. All debts contracted and engagements entered into before the adoption of this Constitution shall be as valid against the United States. We're picking up all of the old debt. So this is like the college graduates who leave with a lot of student debt. We're coming with a lot of war debt. Constitutional laws which made pursuant thereof treaties, supreme law of the land. There's the supremacy clause. When they eventually get to make decisions later, they're going to go time and time again to the supremacy clause, always citing this. In fact, Marbury versus Madison, when she gave you that question earlier about the implied power, this is what they said. It's part of the supremacy clause that we can do this. The senators and representatives before mentioned, members of several states, all executive and judicial officers have taken oath. I've taken oath for 45 years as I worked as a military officer in the United States and later as a senior executive in the Department of Defense. Everybody you meet who's in an elected position is probably taking the same oath, but if they're federal official, they're definitely taking it. We make a big ceremony about it. People come together. We repeat our oaths periodically, and they have guys like me go around and teach people about their constitutional responsibilities. I can tell you, your federal government takes the Constitution very seriously. Those federal employees that they're always talking about on TV, they really believe in this stuff. Occasionally I'll meet a, quote, bad egg, but not very many in 45 years of service. Ratification of the conventions of 9 states shall be sufficient to establish the Constitution. We don't need majority, we'll just take 9. So this is kind of giving the finger to Rhode Island. And Rhode Island knows it. Yeah. This is corrections. We didn't have word processors back then, so at the end of the book, you'd have to go and find all the mistakes. And you could go back through and change it yourself, but they weren't going to do it for you. Ratification was a near-run thing. 1787, these first states jump on it. So we're off and running in 1787, the year it comes out. 1788 is an uncertain time. Massachusetts is a very close vote. Maryland, South Carolina, and then it goes to Virginia and New York, the 2 supersized states. There, everybody rushes in. The Federalist Papers are written to try to get New York and Virginia over the threshold. And while they're not looking, New Hampshire passes it. It's all done. And that's why New Hampshire comes out every 4 years and said, we elect your president, we gave you your Constitution. They're very proud of the fact that they broke the tie. As soon as they did it, Virginia and New York, they went ahead and ratified it too. What the heck, you know, we're not going to get anything else. The holdouts were North Carolina. They were very late. Rhode Island didn't ratify the Constitution until after George Washington was already in office. And then next week I'll start with the Bill of Rights, because we don't have time tonight. I've already run a little bit over. The Bill of Rights is basically Madison tells these people, you don't need to turn against ratifying the Constitution. You need to ratify the Constitution. All those rights you're talking about, they're already there. Those and so much more. And if I enumerate 10, and he had 12 in the original list, people will think that's all you got. But you've got all of these and more. Nevertheless, people like Jefferson and others hold out, and Madison is forced to write a Bill of Rights. He starts with 12, 10 get through, the 10 that we're going to start with talking about next week, and those are the Bill of Rights that are guiding us then. After I get through the Bill of Rights, we will start through that high-speed railway journey through modern history, ending with the crises that we find on our doorstep today. I appreciate your time and attention tonight, and thank you for coming. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm supposed to turn it back over to my student leaders. I apologize.
Thank you, Dr. Stafford. On behalf of MacIver's Grant Public Library and all of our community partners, thank you so much for joining us tonight. Join us next week for our finale session, when Dr. Stafford will stand firmly on our framers' Constitution and launch a whirlwind tour of the events that have shaped our constitutional journey over the past 2+ centuries that have shaped, a Constitution in practice discussion, I'm sorry. Please take a few minutes to look at the community art wall on your way out. Persons can still send in their artwork, and it will be displayed here through the end of October for community viewing. Refreshments are still available in the lobby. Please help yourselves before you go. And thank you again for being a part of the 3rd evening of the U.S. Values and Constitution series. Have a safe trip home, and we look forward to seeing you next week.